moment Ryan saw the pregnancy test in the trash, time seemed to slow. His heart pounded, his breath caught in his throat. 2 pink lines. Pregnant. But how? They hadn't been intimate in months. A cold wave of realization crashed over him. His hands trembled as he gripped the plastic stick, his mind racing through every possible explanation, every single one leading to the same horrifying truth. Emma had been distant, secretive, too occupied with her work trips and late nights, but now everything made sense. This wasn't his child. She had been with someone else. And she had planned to trap him into fatherhood. Ryan clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay calm. He wouldn't confront her, not yet. If she thought she could manipulate him into raising another man's child, she had no idea what was coming next. But before we dive deeper into the story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Ryan Carter had always been a man of precision. As an architect, he understood structure, balance, and the importance of a solid foundation. His marriage, however, had begun to feel like a crumbling building, one where the cracks were no longer just cosmetic, but structural, threatening to bring everything down. At 42, he had built a successful career in Austin, Texas, designing homes that others dreamed of living in. But his own home, once warm and filled with love, had grown cold, its walls echoing with silence rather than laughter. His wife, Emma, once vibrant and full of affection, had become distant. At 38, she was at the peak of her career as a marketing executive, her schedule packed with meetings, late-night projects, and business trips that seemed to multiply without warning. Ryan had initially attributed the shift in their relationship to the natural wear and tear of marriage. After all, 12 years together was no small feat. People changed, work got stressful, life got in the way. That's what he told himself every time she brushed him off with a tired sigh or an excuse about stress or exhaustion. But it wasn't just about the lack of intimacy, though that had all but disappeared. It was the way she avoided eye contact, the way she kept her phone glued to her hand as if it held the secrets of the universe, the way she seemed present in body but miles away in mind. Yet, despite these red flags, Ryan had chosen to ignore them, convincing himself that every marriage went through phases, that whatever was happening between them would eventually pass. He had no idea that his entire reality was about to be shattered in the most devastating way. That morning started like any other. The Texas sun filtered through the blinds, casting warm golden stripes across the bedroom walls. Ryan swung his legs over the side of the bed, rubbing the sleep from his eyes as Emma moved around the room, already dressed for work. She barely acknowledged him as she grabbed her bag, muttering something about an early meeting before disappearing downstairs. The distant sound of the front door clicking shut left him with an unshakable sense of unease, though he couldn't quite pinpoint why. He moved into the bathroom, reaching for his toothbrush, when something in the trash can caught his eye. A glimpse of white plastic, half buried beneath a mound of crumpled tissues and an empty shampoo bottle. His breath caught in his throat as he reached down, carefully pulling it out. The sight of the 2 bold pink lines on the pregnancy test made his entire body go numb. For a moment he just stared, his brain refusing to process what his eyes were telling him. Pregnant. Emma was pregnant, but that was impossible. They hadn't been intimate in months. The realization hit him like a freight train, sending his pulse into overdrive. His hands tightened around the plastic stick as a sickening wave of dread settled into his stomach. His first instinct was denial. Maybe it was old. Maybe it wasn't even Emma's. But no, he knew better. She had been careful, meticulous. If she had hidden this, it was because she never wanted him to find it. His mind raced, searching for some explanation, but every possible scenario led to the same horrifying conclusion. This wasn't his child. The bathroom walls felt like they were closing in on him, but years of discipline kept him grounded. Losing control now would accomplish nothing. Confronting Emma immediately would be too easy, too emotional. He couldn't afford to let her twist this into something it wasn't, to gaslight him into believing he was overreacting. He needed proof. He needed a plan. Slowly, methodically, he placed the test back exactly where he had found it, adjusting the trash to make it look undisturbed. He took a deep breath, forcing his face into a neutral expression as he stepped out of the bathroom. His world had just been turned upside down, but Emma could never know that, not yet. Walking downstairs, he found her in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone with one hand while stirring her coffee with the other. She looked calm, relaxed, as if she hadn't just detonated a bomb in their marriage. The casual normalcy of it all made Ryan's stomach turn. He watched her closely, noting the way she barely glanced at him as he sat down across from her. "You look like you slept well," he said, his voice perfectly even, masking the storm raging beneath the surface. Emma glanced up briefly, offering a distracted smile before taking a sip of coffee. "Yeah, same old, another busy day ahead." She was lying. He could see it now, clearer than ever. Every word, every movement was calculated. She wasn't just hiding something, she had been doing it for a long time. His hands curled into fists beneath the table, but outwardly he remained composed. He had spent years designing structures that could withstand the harshest condition. Now, he was about to construct something far more intricate, a plan to expose his wife for the liar she truly was. Ryan watched Emma more closely than ever, his suspicion sharpening with every passing day. It started with her phone. She never left it unattended anymore. Before, she used to leave it lying around on the kitchen counter, on the nightstand, even in the bathroom while she showered. Now it was always within reach, clutched in her hand or tucked into her pocket like a lifeline. Whenever it buzzed, she would glance at it quickly, her fingers moving over the screen before tucking it away as if nothing had happened. The first time he noticed it, he brushed it off. The second time, he filed it away. By the third time, he knew something was off. Then there were the showers. Emma had never been one to linger in the bathroom, but lately she had been taking longer than usual. 20, sometimes 30 minutes at a time. Ryan listened closely, standing just outside the door some nights, straining to hear anything other than the sound of running water. There were no phone calls, no muffled conversations, but he knew she was doing something in there. The silence was too perfect, too calculated. He wanted to confront her, to knock on the door and demand answers, but he held back. That would tip his hand too soon, and he needed more than just gut instincts. One morning over breakfast, he decided to test her. She had been in and out of the bathroom all night, claiming her stomach was upset. When she finally sat down with a piece of dry toast and a cup of tea, he watched her closely. "You feeling okay?" he asked, his voice calm, casual. Emma sighed, rubbing her stomach lightly. "Yeah, I think it was the sushi we had the other night. Must have been bad." Ryan didn't blink. "Sushi?" He tilted his head, acting as if he were trying to recall. "We haven't had sushi in weeks." The second the words left his mouth, he saw the half-second pause, the flicker of panic in her eyes before she forced a small laugh. "Oh, right. I meant the takeout I had for lunch the other day. Guess it didn't sit well." Ryan leaned back in his chair, nodding slowly as if he believed her, but inside his stomach twisted with certainty. She was getting sloppy. She had always been a good liar, smooth, effortless, always one step ahead, but now the cracks were beginning to show. She thought she had him fooled, but she was wrong. Every slip, every inconsistency only fueled his determination to uncover the truth. And when he did, there would be no way for her to wriggle out of it. Ryan wasn't looking for anything when he took out the trash that evening. His mind was already burdened with suspicion, each moment with Emma feeling like a carefully rehearsed performance, one where he was expected to play the fool. But as he lifted the trash bag from the bin, something caught his eye, a crumpled receipt wedged between an empty wine bottle and a takeout container. It wasn't the receipt itself that made his stomach twist. It was the store name printed at the top. A high-end boutique in San Antonio, a place Emma had no reason to visit, at least not that he was aware of. He smoothed out the slip of paper, his pulse quickening as he scanned the list of items. Silk lingerie, luxury candles, a bottle of men's cologne. His jaw tightened as he read it again, as if doing so would somehow change the reality in front of him. These weren't impulse purchases. They were intimate, deliberate. The lingerie wasn't for her to lounge around the house in, not when she had barely touched him in months. The candles weren't for their home, he would have noticed them, and the cologne, the one thing she couldn't possibly justify, certainly wasn't for him. He didn't wear cologne, he never had. His first instinct was to march upstairs and throw the receipt in her face, to demand she explain who the hell she had been shopping for, but he forced himself to breathe, to stay calm. He couldn't afford to be reckless. If she had been bold enough to bring this evidence home, it meant she didn't think he would find it. Or worse, she thought he wouldn't question it. That was her mistake. He folded the receipt neatly and tucked it into his pocket before heading inside, masking the storm brewing beneath his skin. Later that evening, as Emma curled up on the couch, phone in hand, Ryan casually dropped the question, "Who's the cologne for?" He had practiced the words in his head, ensuring they sounded light, unbothered, like it was nothing more than a passing thought. Emma's reaction was immediate, a subtle stiffening of her shoulders, a flicker of something unreadable in her expression before she turned to face him with a smile that felt too forced. "Oh, that? It's for my boss. His birthday's coming up and the whole team pitched in for a gift." Ryan nodded, his expression carefully neutral. "Nice of you to take the lead on that," he said, his voice easy, relaxed, as if he believed her. Emma exhaled slightly, the tension in her posture easing. She thought she had gotten away with it, but Ryan wasn't fooled. He had spent years learning how to read blueprints, to see the weaknesses in a structure before they could become a problem, and right now, he saw the fault lines in her lie. It was quick, practiced, but just a little too rehearsed. If she had been telling the truth, she wouldn't have hesitated. She wouldn't have needed to think so hard. As she turned back to her phone, Ryan watched her closely, his mind already working through his next move. She thought he was just another oblivious husband, blind to what was happening right in front of him, but she was wrong. He was watching, waiting, and when the moment was right, he was going to tear her web of lies apart. Ryan had always been a man of logic, of reason, but as he sat in his car that morning, engine idling, waiting for Emma to leave the house, he felt something unfamiliar simmering beneath his skin. A cold, calculated kind of anger. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This wasn't baseless suspicion. She was hiding something, and he was done waiting for the truth to reveal itself. Today, he was going to find it. He watched as Emma stepped out the front door, her posture relaxed, her face void of any guilt or hesitation. She was dressed sharply, more polished than usual, a fitted blazer hugging her curves, heels clicking against the pavement as she made her way to her car. He had memorized her routine, noted the days she left earlier than necessary, the ones where she came home later than she claimed to. And today he was going to see exactly where she was going. Letting a few minutes pass, he pulled out of the driveway, keeping a safe distance behind her as she navigated through the city streets. At first, everything seemed normal. She took her usual route, merged onto the highway, but then, just when she should have exited toward downtown where her office was, she kept going. Ryan's grip on the wheel tightened as she took an unexpected turn, heading toward the outskirts of town. This wasn't her office. His pulse pounded as she pulled into the parking lot of a small cafe, the kind of quiet, tucked-away place meant for private meetings. Ryan eased his car to a stop a block away, his heartbeat hammering in his ears as he watched her step out, adjusting her blazer, smoothing her hair. She wasn't just grabbing coffee, she was meeting someone. And then he saw him. A tall man emerged from a sleek black sedan, dressed in business casual, just enough effort to look put together without seeming like he was trying too hard. He was broad-shouldered, confident, moving toward Emma with familiarity. Not just an acquaintance, not just a colleague. Ryan's stomach twisted as he watched Emma's face light up, a smile stretching across her lips, one he hadn't seen directed at him in months. Liam Donovan, 40 years old, a finance consultant. Ryan didn't know how he knew the name instantly, but he did. Maybe it was a detail she had slipped into a conversation once, maybe it was something he had seen on her phone when she wasn't looking. But as he watched them greet each other, saw Liam's hand rest on Emma's lower back as they walked inside, something inside him snapped into place. This was real, this was happening. He reached for his phone, steadying his trembling hands as he lifted it, snapping a few photos through the windshield. He zoomed in, capturing every damning detail. Emma's animated laughter, the way she leaned in when Liam spoke, the way she touched his arm in a way she hadn't touched Ryan in what felt like forever. They weren't just having coffee, they were something more. And as Ryan sat there watching the woman he had built a life with act as if none of it meant anything, he realized that the moment of confrontation was coming, but not yet. He needed more. He needed to be sure that when he finally laid out the truth, there would be no escape. Ryan had spent years designing structures, understanding their weaknesses, knowing where to apply pressure to reveal their flaws. Now, as he sat in his dimly lit home office, Emma's laptop open before him, he realized that uncovering the truth about his wife was no different. Every structure had a point of failure. He just had to find hers. Her password was laughably predictable, her birthday, and the last 4 digits of her phone number. She had always been meticulous about many things, but technology had never been one of them. Within seconds, he was in. His breath was steady, but his fingers were tight around the mouse as he clicked through her emails, scanning for anything out of the ordinary. It didn't take long to find it. Buried beneath work emails and promotional newsletters was an ongoing thread between her and Liam Donovan. Ryan's stomach churned as he opened it, his eyes moving over the words, the subtle flirtations disguised as professional exchanges, the hidden messages woven between business talk. It wasn't just casual. It was deep, inside jokes, late-night confessions, conversations that had no place between a married woman and another man. He kept scrolling, his pulse pounding with each revelation. Then he saw the real proof. Hotel reservations, dinner plans, a weekend trip to Denver she had told him was a corporate retreat. She had been lying for months. No, longer than that. This wasn't something that had started overnight. It was premeditated, built on deception, carefully constructed to keep him in the dark while she played house with another man. But it wasn't until he checked her calendar that he felt his world truly collapse. Friday, 3 p.m. Dr. Keller prenatal checkup. The room around him seemed to tilt as he stared at the words, his breath catching in his throat. His mind raced, trying to rationalize, to come up with some other explanation, but there wasn't one. This wasn't an accident. She had been avoiding intimacy with him for months, but she was pregnant. The child she was carrying wasn't his. A cold, consuming rage settled deep in his chest, different from anything he had ever felt before. It was a quiet kind of fury, the kind that didn't explode but instead burned, slow and steady, shaping itself into something razor-sharp. He sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the screen, the weight of betrayal pressing down on him like a vice. The pieces were all there, fitting together in a way that made him feel sick. She wasn't just cheating, she was trapping him. He could see it now, the perfect con. She would pretend the baby was his, playing the role of the devoted wife while slowly tightening her grip on him, securing financial and emotional control over his life. And all the while, she would continue her secret affair with Liam, sneaking away under the guise of work, maintaining her perfect little double life. She had planned this, carefully, methodically. She had expected him to never question her, to accept everything at face value. But she had underestimated him. Ryan closed the laptop, his grip tightening around the edge of the desk. The fury that had been simmering inside him didn't consume him, it refined him. He wasn't just going to expose her. He was going to make her regret every single calculated move she had made. Emma thought she had him exactly where she wanted. She had no idea what was coming next. Ryan didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed beside Emma, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing, wondering how she could sleep so soundly while living a double life. Every time he closed his eyes, the images from her emails replayed in his mind. The flirty messages, the hidden rendezvous, the prenatal appointment for a child that wasn't his. The rage inside him had settled into something colder now, something more controlled. He wouldn't lash out. He wouldn't confront her in a fit of emotion. No, that would be too easy. He needed her to think she had won. The next morning, he acted as if nothing had changed. When she kissed his cheek before heading to work, he kissed her back. When she asked him to pick up groceries later, he nodded without hesitation. And when she left, her heels clicking confidently against the hardwood floor, he smiled to himself. She had no idea that he was about to turn her world upside down. That evening, as she scrolled through her phone on the couch, Ryan sat beside her, casually stretching his arm over the backrest. "We haven't had a night out in a while," he said, his voice light. "How about dinner this Saturday? Something nice, maybe that Italian place downtown?" Emma looked up, blinking as if caught off guard. Then, just as quickly, she smiled. "Really?" she asked, tilting her head. "I thought you weren't into fancy dinners." Ryan chuckled. "I figured we could use a little break from routine. Just us, good food, good wine." He watched her closely, saw the way her posture relaxed, how the tension in her shoulders eased just slightly. She thought she had him fooled. She thought this was him trying to reconnect, trying to patch things up in a marriage she had already burned to the ground. "That sounds nice," she said, smiling as she leaned in, pressing a kiss to his lips. It took everything in him not to recoil. "I'll make the reservation." "Perfect," he said, matching her energy. She returned to her phone, her fingers tapping quickly as she likely texted Liam, letting him know she had plans with her husband. laughing to herself about how easy this all was. Ryan leaned back, staring at the ceiling, already imagining how this night would end. Not with romance, not with reconciliation, but with the kind of truth that would destroy her. The restaurant was elegant, the kind of place Emma loved. Dim lighting, white tablecloths, an extensive wine list. She had dressed for the occasion wearing a deep red dress that hugged her figure, her hair styled to perfection. Ryan watched her as she smiled, placing her napkin on her lap, completely unaware that this wasn't a romantic evening, this was an execution. She glanced at him, raising an eyebrow. "You're being unusually quiet," she said, reaching for her wine glass. "Long day at work?" Ryan smiled, taking a slow sip of his drink. "You could say that. Just been thinking a lot about us, actually." Emma tilted her head slightly, feigning curiosity. "Oh." He leaned back, swirling the wine in his glass. "Yeah, about how busy you've been lately. All those late nights, the work trips, the networking meetings. It must be exhausting." There it was, the flicker of hesitation in her eyes. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but Ryan had been watching her long enough to know when she was piecing together a lie. She forced a chuckle, shaking her head. "You're making it sound like I'm never home." "Sometimes it feels that way," he said, his tone even. "Like last Friday, you were out all evening." She nodded without missing a beat. "Yeah, client dinner. I told you about that." Ryan exhaled through his nose, resting his elbows on the table, his eyes locked onto hers. "You did," he admitted, pausing for just a second before delivering the next blow. "Just like you told me about the networking meeting at the cafe." Emma froze. It was the smallest reaction, a barely noticeable tightening of her grip around her wine glass, but it was there. She recovered quickly, forcing a confused expression. "What are you talking about?" Ryan reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone and placed it on the table between them. He tapped the screen once and the thumbnail of the video appeared, a crystal clear image of her and Liam at the clinic together. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise of the restaurant like a blade. "You tell me." Emma's face went pale. Her lips parted as if she wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. She knew there was no way out of this. Her hands trembled slightly as she set her glass down. "Ryan," she whispered, barely audible, her breath hitching in her throat. "Save it," he said, leaning in closer. "I know everything, the emails, the hotel bookings, the doctor's appointment, the fact that you're pregnant with his child, not mine." Emma's mouth opened and closed, her entire body stiff with shock. For a moment, Ryan thought she might break down, beg for forgiveness, plead for another chance, but instead her expression hardened. She leaned forward, her voice low and venomous. "You really think this is all my fault?" she hissed. "You think I wanted things to turn out this way?" Ryan stared at her, his stomach twisting at how effortlessly she turned the situation around. "I had no choice," she continued, her eyes flashing with something dark. "Do you even hear yourself? You're so predictable, so boring. You've been distant for months, wrapped up in your own little world, treating me like a roommate instead of a wife. And Liam, he understands me. He listens. He makes me feel alive." Ryan clenched his jaw, gripping the table so hard his knuckles turned white. "So that justifies lying to me, cheating on me, carrying another man's child while pretending it was mine?" Emma scoffed, rolling her eyes. "You act like you were some perfect husband. Newsflash, Ryan, you weren't. You let this happen." Ryan exhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay calm. He had expected denial. He had even expected fake remorse. But this level of arrogance? That was her mistake? He picked up his phone, his voice chillingly calm. "You want to keep playing games, Emma? Fine. But in about 5 minutes, Liam's wife is going to see this video. And when I walk out of here, so will everyone else." Emma's bravado cracked. Her breath hitched as her mask of defiance wavered. "Ryan, don't." But it was too late. He was done being the fool. Ryan didn't give Emma another second of his time. He stood up, leaving her frozen in shock at the dinner table, and walked straight out of the restaurant. The cool night air hit his face, but it did nothing to cool the fire burning inside him. He took out his phone, scrolled through his email drafts, and with one tap, sent everything to Natalie Donovan. The evidence was undeniable. Videos of Emma and Liam at the clinic, screenshots of their emails, photos of them together at the cafe. He imagined Natalie sitting at home, reading the messages, feeling the same gut-wrenching betrayal that had consumed him for days. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. Emma and Liam had built their affair on deception, and now that foundation was crumbling beneath them. Not 5 minutes later, his phone buzzed. A single message from an unknown number. "Who is this? What the hell is this?" Ryan smirked. "Ask your husband." He typed the words, hit send, and turned off his phone. By the next morning, the fallout had already begun. Liam's life unraveled at breakneck speed. Natalie wasted no time. She packed up her children, hired a lawyer, and served Liam with divorce papers before he even had a chance to smooth things over. His cushy life, the one he had built on a lie, came crashing down overnight. Ryan watched from the sidelines as news of Liam's affair spread. His name carried weight in the finance world, and now that reputation was stained beyond repair. Clients dropped him, his firm distanced itself from him. The golden boy, who had once been untouchable, was now radioactive. And then Liam did exactly what Ryan expected him to do. He called. Ryan let the phone ring, his jaw tightening as he watched the name flash across the screen. The coward was finally facing the consequences of his actions. He let it ring again before answering, his voice calm, controlled. "What do you want, Liam?" "You son of a bitch," Liam spat, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. "You think you can just destroy my life and walk away?" Ryan laughed, shaking his head. "You destroyed your own life the second you decided to sleep with my wife. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Liam was spiraling now. "Natalie left. She took the kids. My firm is looking into my contracts. Everything I built." Ryan cut him off, his voice dropping to something cold and final. "Everything you built your life on lies, and now you're pissed because the truth finally caught up to you?" Liam was silent. Ryan let the moment hang between them before delivering the final blow. "Stay away from me. Stay away from my life. You call me again, and I promise the whole world will know exactly the kind of man you are." He hung up, blocking the number. Liam Donovan was nothing to him now. But Emma still was. When Ryan returned home, she was waiting for him in the living room, still in that red dress from dinner, her makeup smudged, her expression tight with desperation. "We need to talk," she said. Ryan exhaled, shaking his head. "There's nothing left to talk about." Emma stepped closer, her hands clasped as if she could still salvage this. "I made a mistake," she whispered, her voice softer now, more vulnerable. "Ryan, No," he interrupted, his voice sharp. "You don't get to do that. You don't get to act like this was some lapse in judgment, some one-time mistake. You planned this. You lied to me for months. You were going to make me raise another man's child while sneaking around behind my back." Emma's eyes welled up with tears. "I didn't know what else to do." Ryan let out a bitter laugh. "You could have told the truth." She shook her head quickly, stepping forward, reaching for his hands. "We can fix this. We don't have to throw everything away." Ryan didn't move, his expression unreadable. "You already did." Emma swallowed hard, desperation flashing across her face. "Please, we can go to therapy. We can work through this. I love you, Ryan." He studied her for a long moment, then exhaled slowly. "If you really loved me, this never would have happened." She let out a soft sob, covering her mouth with one hand. Ryan stepped back, his voice steady, unwavering. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to pack your things and you're going to leave. I don't care where you go. You can run to Liam or you can disappear, but you're not staying in this house another night." Emma's breath hitched. "You can't just kick me out." Ryan leaned in slightly, his tone like steel. "I can, and I will. Because if you don't walk out of that door tonight, I'll make sure everyone, your family, your friends, your job, knows exactly what you've done." Emma's lips trembled as she searched his face, looking for any sign that he was bluffing. But there was nothing there. No warmth, no hesitation, just a man who had finally reached his limit. She let out a shaky breath, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "Fine." Ryan watched as she turned and walked upstairs. He stood in silence as she moved through their bedroom, stuffing clothes into a suitcase. the life they had built together unraveling with every folded piece of fabric. He felt nothing. By the time she came back down, her suitcase in hand, her eyes red and swollen, he didn't even flinch. She hesitated at the door, turning back to him one last time. "Was any of it real?" she whispered. Ryan stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded, his voice hollow. "It was, but killed it." "You killed it." Emma let out a soft sob, then turned and walked out, closing the door behind her. Ryan stood there in the silence, breathing in the emptiness she left behind. It felt like the first breath of freedom he had taken in a long, long time. The house felt different without her. At first it was just the small things. No lingering scent of her perfume, no sound of her heels clicking against the hardwood floor, no phone left charging on the nightstand. But as the days passed, Ryan realized that it wasn't just the absence of Emma that made the house feel different. It was the absence of weight, of the invisible tension that had wrapped itself around him for months, suffocating him without him even realizing. For the first time in years, he felt like he could breathe. At first, there were moments when the silence felt unnatural, when he would wake up expecting to hear her in the shower or see her sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. But then slowly, the silence became something else: peace. He threw himself into work, taking on projects that he had previously put on hold. Designing had always been his escape, his way of controlling something when everything else felt chaotic. But for too long, he had let his focus slip, distracted by Emma, by the gnawing feeling that something was wrong. Now, without her, he felt his creativity return. He spent hours in his home office, sketching, drafting, building again, not just for clients, but for himself. Then came the physical transformation. The stress of his marriage had taken a toll on him, but he hadn't fully seen it until now. He had let himself go, skipped workouts, eaten whatever was convenient, and ignored the things that once made him feel good. That changed fast. He woke up early, lacing up his running shoes, feeling the pavement beneath his feet as he pushed himself forward. The sweat, the burn in his muscles, the ache in his lungs. It was a reminder that he was alive, that his body was his again. And the music. He hadn't touched his guitar in years. It had sat in the corner of his office, collecting dust, a reminder of something he used to love but had abandoned somewhere along the way. One night, after a long run and a cold shower, he picked it up, running his fingers over the strings, the familiar weight settling against his body like an old friend. He started playing again, filling the empty house with something that wasn't regret or bitterness, but something real, something that belonged to him. He reconnected with old friends, the ones he had drifted from over the years, too consumed by a marriage that had been falling apart long before he realized it. The first time he met up with his old college buddy Chris for drinks, he expected it to be awkward. But it wasn't. It was easy, effortless, like no time had passed at all. "I gotta say, man," Chris said, clinking his beer against Ryan's, "you look different. Lighter." Ryan smirked, taking a sip. "That's because I am." And for the first time in years, he actually meant it. Emma and Liam tried to hold on to whatever fantasy they had built, but reality had a way of crushing illusions. Their relationship, forged in secrecy and betrayal, couldn't withstand the weight of the destruction they had caused. Without the thrill of sneaking around, without the deception to fuel their affair, the cracks in their foundation became impossible to ignore. Liam, once the charming and confident man Emma had risked everything for, was now bitter and resentful. His life had imploded. His wife had left him, taking their kids with her. His career was in free fall, and his name had become synonymous with scandal in his professional circles. Clients refused to work with him. His colleagues whispered behind his back. The firm that once valued him as an asset now treated him like a liability. Emma, once so certain that Liam was her escape, began to see him for what he really was: a man who had just as much to lose as she did, a man who had promised excitement but had only delivered ruin. The chemistry that had once felt so intoxicating now felt suffocating. Their arguments grew frequent, heated, filled with accusations and regret. Liam blamed Emma for everything, for not being careful enough, for letting Ryan find out, for sending his life into a downward spiral. Emma in turn realized that Liam had never been the solution to her problems. He had just been a distraction from them. And now, without Ryan to hold her up, without her double life to sustain her, she was forced to face the consequences of her choices. It didn't take long for her to leave. She packed her bags once again, just as she had that night at Ryan's house, only this time there was no one watching, no one left to care. She moved to another city, away from the whispers, away from the people who knew what she had done. But no matter where she went, she couldn't escape it. The weight of her decisions followed her. She had traded stability for chaos, security for a man who had lost everything just as quickly as she had. Meanwhile, Ryan had never felt more at peace. The anger, the betrayal, the heartbreak, it no longer consumed him. It had shaped him, yes, but it hadn't destroyed him. If anything, it had rebuilt him, made him stronger, sharper, more aware of what he truly wanted in life. He no longer viewed what had happened as a tragedy. It had been painful, yes, but it had also been necessary. It had freed him from a life that had been rotting beneath the surface, from a marriage that had long since lost its meaning. One evening, as he sat on his back porch with a glass of whiskey in hand, he thought about the man he had been before all of this. The man who had ignored the red flags, who had trusted blindly, who had convinced himself that love was enough. That man no longer existed, and that was a good thing. Betrayal didn't break him, it revealed the truth. And sometimes, the truth was the greatest gift of all. Ryan sat on his back porch, the last rays of sunlight fading into the horizon, casting an orange glow over the city skyline. A glass of whiskey rested in his hand, half empty, the ice melting slowly as he swirled it absent-mindedly. The air was cool, crisp, carrying the distant hum of life moving forward. He had spent the past few months rebuilding himself, finding strength in the ruins of what once was. He had come out the other side, not broken, not defeated, but transformed. He had learned a lesson that most men never wanted to face. Sometimes, the person you trust the most is the one who will betray you in ways you never imagined. He exhaled slowly, letting his thoughts settle before turning his gaze forward, locking eyes with the audience. His voice was steady, calm, but filled with weight. What would you do if the person you trusted the most turned out to be your greatest enemy? He let the question hang in the air, knowing that somewhere out there someone watching was facing the same nightmare he had once lived through. He had been that man, the one who had ignored the signs, who had believed in love, who had thought betrayal was something that happened to other people. But the truth was, betrayal didn't discriminate. It could happen to anyone at any time, and when it did, you had two choices: let it destroy you or let it make you stronger. He leaned forward slightly, his fingers tightening around the glass as he continued. Betrayal doesn't define you. It only reveals who truly deserves a place in your life. You don't have to fight for someone who was never fighting for you. You don't have to hold on to someone who let go of you a long time ago. Walk away with your head held high and let those who deceived you drown in their own lies, because in the end, the ones who betray you are the ones who lose. And you. Ryan took one last sip of his whiskey, letting the warmth settle in his chest. He had spent too much time looking back, trying to make sense of something that was never meant to last. Now, he was finally looking ahead, toward a future that belonged to him and no one else. He stood up, exhaling deeply as he walked back inside, shutting the door on the past for good. Ryan's gaze lingers for a moment, the weight of his words settling into the quiet night around him. Then, with a slow exhale, he leans back, his expression unreadable but firm. The battle was over. The scars would remain, but they no longer defined him. Instead, they were proof that he had survived, that he had reclaimed his life from the hands of those who tried to manipulate and control him. Now it was your turn. What's your story of betrayal, resilience, and rising above? Have you ever been deceived by someone you trusted? How did you fight back and reclaim your power? Share your experience in the comments below, because your story could be the one that gives someone else the strength to walk away from their own pain. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping, inspiring stories of courage and redemption. Every time you engage, you help amplify the message that no one should ever be trapped in a life of lies and deceit. Let's build a community where we support and uplift each other, because in the end, the ones who betray us will drown in their own deception, and we rise.